Hey, Shalom Akim, Shalom, Shalom. Giving all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh Bashim Yahushai, Bashim Makakwat Dash, double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone for teaching us his truth and salutations to the sincere Akim and Akwathim. Listen, may the blessing of election be upon your house. My name is Raquai. I'm back in here with another quick and Lord's will, as always, an edifying lesson. And I guess for today's lesson, I wanted to discuss adult content and basically how purging away from it, getting away from that, can make you more spiritually profitable, using that sexual energy to become more profitable spiritually, right? And this is something that was kind of like on my mind. It's not, I'm more of a the type of person I want to, discuss this, in terms of, because realizing and meditating on it, now when you also, for brothers who've ever seen it, speaking about adult content, I'm talking about like OnlyFans and the Hub and all that kind of stuff. All that stuff is really, it's covert warfare, really. And it's really a method, it's a method designed to essentially keep us weak, keep us, in a state where, you're docile, and you won't it dampens your masculinity. And that's one of the things that, these other nations are afraid of, is the masculinity, the healthy masculinity of the Israelite man. That's why they want to try and bind the strong man, right, and get him out of the house. Right. So, I wanted to discuss this, because, even on, further meditation, it really is, it's a really destructive. It's really destructive, not only, for yourself, but it's really destructive for your brain, right? Because it causes your, to, you're giving your brain so much, happy dopamine, and essentially you're deep frying your brain like a soft boiled egg, and giving it so much, dopamine, right? But what you understand and fail to realize, like, what you're watching, isn't real, right? So there is that conflict that you feel, you don't, we all struggle from, right? Like, this is something that, you know that Paul, discusses. As a matter of fact, I'll start there, right? But I kind of wanted to discuss it, to, for brothers who might go through this, right? I myself have suffered from this, right? And the scriptures say that when you're converted, to strengthen thy brethren, right? Because it's not something that's helpful and is healthy, for you, for your development, your spiritual development. And essentially, I'm kind of advocating, to wean yourself, mortify, as Paul said as well, mortify your members, and being able to redirect a lot of that energy, that sexual energy, into some things that are a lot more productive for you. This is Romans 7. I'll start here. I'll start at Romans. Let's see. I'll start at verse 17. This is Romans chapter 7, verse 17 in the NLT, and it says here, so I am not the one doing wrong. It is the sin living in me that does it. And I know that nothing good lives in me, that is, in my sinful nature. I want to do what is right, but I can't. I want to do what is good, but I don't. Right. So this is explaining, this, goes into the different of the conflict of the natures, the spirit, wrestling against the flesh, and these two are essentially contrary. And then when you live in this society, in this Babylonian society, basically it pushes a vibration of constantly feeding the flesh rather than actual discipline or bridling, temperance, patience. This is not the type of society that actually perpetuates that. It's a society that kind of just, yo, obey your thirst, go in, go home, go all in. It's a very gluttonous, it's a very over sexualized, it's a very, untempered spirit. That's why a lot of these people are very, very untempered. So when you look at, content, not just I'm talking about adult content, but it's also content on YouTube you can find where you find a lot of people, they just eat anything, they just eat everything, I forgot what they call them, but those people that they just eat a bunch of foods all at once, you know what I'm saying? So it's a very untempered, um what's it called, a very untempered society, and that's why these people are very, they're very unbalanced, right? So going back here, this is Romans 7 verse 21 in the NLT, and it says, I have discovered the principle of life. When I want to do what is right, I inevitably do what is wrong. I love the Most High's law with all my heart, right? And, there isn't really like a law, on things such as like masturbation, but, it's one of those things where it's looking at that content, it can really rewire, your mind to see wickedness, but it's dressed up very well. Because understand the enemy, right? The enemy is very good at making something very wicked look good. Because even further upon meditation, when you really think of it, the type of content that they perpetuate, knowing that Esau is a very, you understand through the scriptures, that Esau is a profane person, right? Pursuant to the book of Hebrews. Now, he's a soul, he has a type of soul, the soul that's within him is not upright. So this is the type of stuff he perpetuates to the people, to the masses. Those dynamics, such as you have mother and daughter, you have three-way, you have dad sleeping with, I'm sorry, son sleeping with dad's wife, all these things that perpet adultery, sleeping with the neighbor's wife and all this kind of stuff. So, seeing all that, it's like, when you go into our laws, we're supposed to be holy people, right? And then when you see all that, they dress it up, they make it look good. So that's why, that stuff is not good for your spirit. That stuff is not healthy for your mind, right? You want to meditate, upon good things, upon righteous things, right? You want to have healthy, conversation. And when you go into the word conversation, it really literally refers to a manner of life. So that manner of life is beneath us, because we're supposed to be a holy people, right? So, that is the law is really good, but the flesh that's within us, I'm sorry, the flesh that we're in, I should say, leads, it wants to be satisfied with all these different, lusts that are within our environment, right? So yes, we have, sexual energy, but it's really, the point is to cut back. That's, my advice, or to get a lady of the evening, you know and to essentially on look for other avenues. That's why I have this picture on the screen here, looking for healthier avenues to redirect that sexual energy that's actually going to make you more profitable, especially spiritually, right? So I'm gonna go excuse me, where's that gonna go? Okay, so since I mentioned other avenues, and redirecting essentially that energy, into other avenues that can actually help you to profit, profit you spiritually. This is First Timothy chapter 4, verse 12. I want to read down here, and I'm reading an NLT actually as well, just continuing on. And it says, "Don't let anyone think less of you because you are young. Be an example to all the believers in what you say and the way you live, in your love and your faith and your purity, right? So going back into that conversation, it says, until I get there, focus on reading the scriptures to the church, encouraging the believers and teaching them, right? So when you read in the KJV, it says give attendance to reading, right? So that's one of those healthy avenues that can actually make you more profitable, right? It can make you more, give you more understanding. The scriptures say, blessed is he that readeth, right? So understanding, knowing the prophecies, as well as encouraging to, as an exhortation to read the stories of old with our different, forefathers, mothers, different kings. Read Kings, right? Because it gives you insight into the different, not just mistakes, but also examples of righteousness that they did, within their lifetime. The things that they did, what did they slip up? Understanding what did they slip up, what did they go right? Did they pray? Did they, what did they do when they were rebuked? What did they do, when they were, faced with a challenge? What did they, what I'm saying? Like, you can get so much insight in regards to the kings, when you read about the different kings of Israel and the different kings of Judah. I'm speaking about after the split, where Rehoboam ruled, and that's what I'm kind of referring to, the different kings and the books of Chronicles, getting those different examples, because the scriptures say that those things written aforetime are written for our learning. So getting, redirecting, that energy, into an avenue that's more positive. So that's why I'm encouraging, to read, because like I'll just use myself as an example. I like to go to the library, and just be surrounded, peace and quiet, so I can get, essentially more inspiration, right? So essentially, edify myself as well as the church, right? So that is essentially, a very positive avenue to basically redirect, that energy, right? Because it's not like the energy goes away, especially if you're the type of person that likes to actually exercise, right? So let me get that one as well. What does it say? Hold on. Salakia, okay, my laptop's a little bit slow. Bodily. Oh, it's in verse 8. Okay. 1 Timothy 4 and 8. It says, for bodily exercise profiteth little, but godliness is profitable unto all things, but having promise of the life that now is, of that which is to come, right? So certain brothers, they're into different avenues of what do you call that, martial arts, exercise training, and get into things too, right? Because like it helps to shift that energy into more productive things that's actually going to help you, right? And you might be in sport, and it might be, I'm sorry, inspired, to get into certain things in lawful, in that are righteous. When I say this, that can actually edify others, right? Edify the body, right? So for example, one of the things for me, I've gotten into was juicing different, understanding different fruits and vegetables, what they do for the body, what they do for certain organs, so like, I like pomegranate juice, like juicing that the most, because um it's one of those fruits where you read about in the scriptures, where essentially it has a plethora of different benefits for the body, benefits for the blood, benefits for men's health, so understanding those things and weaning your way, essentially, basically, we're taking, it's taking away that energy and time you would use towards doing that to make you more profitable spiritually, right? To make you more knowledgeable, right? So, because the energy doesn't, I don't want to say it doesn't go away, right? But it's just, this is basically, you're just shifting the energy around into something that is more productive for you and your health, right? Your spiritual health especially, right? Because that content, because Esau is a profane person, because really and truly what he's trying to do is to um weaken the men, you know. These other nations, if there's one thing I've noticed, even reading the scriptures, I've realized this. um One of the things that these nations seek is to destroy the Israelite man and his seed, you know. And I say that because remember, when you go into the time of Egypt, when they had that Pharaoh that rose up, that Pharaoh rose up that didn't know about Joseph, and we were multiplying, they had a fear in their mindset, like, yo, let's deal with these people peaceably. And one of the things that they said to the Hebrew midwives, if it's a boy, kill him. But if it's a girl, make sure the girl's alive. Now think about that. When you internalize that for a second, you think like, wow, why would they say that? And it's because they understand that the man carries the seed, right? So Esau, they study. These. If I'm gonna be honest, our people, they know they're not as well studied as they think they are. These other nations, especially Esau, he accomplished a diligent search, right? That's what the scriptures say to turn thou, O Jacob, that thou mayest be illuminated. Let me get that. Hold on. Because that's one of the reasons, is to, shun that type of that type of behavior, that type of content, because really it's really covert warfare. And it perpetuates, that Canaanite, those odious works, that those different Canaanites, those different Hamite tribes were into. You know what I'm saying? So seeing that, that's like, it's so it's so against our culture. Let me go to Baruch chapter 4, verse 1 here, and it says, "This is the book of the commandments of the Most High, Yahweh Bashem Shai, and the law that endureth forever. All they that keep it shall come to life, but such as leave it shall die. Turn thee, O Jacob," so you Israelites, Jacob's name was changed to Israel, "and take hold of it, and walk in the presence of the light thereof, that thou mayest be illuminated." So essentially, be illuminated and understanding this is a very slick, sly, slimy tactic of Esau, right? And if they were a righteous people, they wouldn't be pushing that in the first place. If they really were a righteous people, they would be pushing out righteousness, but they're the ones that are primarily, especially those small hats, they're primarily the ones that are behind, those different over sexual industries with those content. That shows you they're not an upright people, man. So that thou mayest, let me read that verse 2 again. It says, "Turn thee, O Jacob, and take hold of it, and walk in the presence of the light thereof, that thou mayest be illuminated." Be illuminated to the different war tactics that your enemy uses. This is not like during the time, you know, of physical combat like World War II, or all those different different wars where you fight against with shields and spears and chariots and guns and stuff like that. But it's still warfare, right? It's still very covert warfare, and it's really designed to hijack your brain so you do the things. And this is why I read those precepts earlier about the natures, right? So essentially, it's basically, it's trying to feed. It's constantly, the flesh wants, it's an environment. Well, I should say it like this: you're in an environment that is constantly, you're constantly bombarded with that kind of vibration, right? So let me read this last one in Timothy, and then I guess I'll leave it there. Is it 2 Timothy 2? This is 2 Timothy 2 verse 21. And it says here, if a man therefore purge himself of these, he shall be a vessel unto honor, sanctified and meet for the pastor's use, prepared to every good work, right? So, those things, when you redirect that energy, it helps you to be more profitable towards the Lord, you know. So that's why, I was encouraging, like, for example, it could be reading, and, being able to utilize your gift, even, whatever gifts that you might have, even more to be more profitable, right? So, um, because at the end of the day, it helps you to wean yourself, off of that content. And it doesn't, and if you could think about it like this as well, it doesn't necessarily have to be, like if the shoe fits, wear it, right? For brothers that may not be the issue, but it might be another kind of issue, right? So, you know, um, I guess I'll leave it there. Actually, I'll read verse 22 and I'll leave it there. And it says, Flee also youthful lusts, but follow righteousness, faith, charity, peace with them that call on the Lord with a pure heart. Right? So, and of those, as Peter said, if these things abound in you, brotherly kindness, godliness, temperance, all those things abound, then essentially you shouldn't be barren, to roughly paraphrase, right? So you're really shifting a lot of that energy into actually, and then you start to actually even, be more clear minded. You won't be so pricked within your spirit, like, because you understand in the spirit this, it feels off, right? So you're really better off, getting if you got to do what you got to do, get a lady of the evening, and then, you go about your business, right? You go about your business, you do your own reading, your studies, your research, your lessons, and so on and so forth, because it really helps you to stay more profitable towards the Lord, right? So, um, I'll leave the lesson there, but, Lord's will, this lesson was quick and edifying. Just like to give all praises, glory, and honor to you, Yahweh Bashim El Shai. Until next time, I say Shabbat Shalom.